They chained Ivara Cale beneath the storm bell because thunder had entered the citadel and the council needed a throat poor enough to blame. No one asked why thunder needed a servant's throat if the vault key had turned first. A throat could be hanged. A key had office behind it. The bell hung above her like a dead moon made of black iron wider than a royal carriage, suspended from 3 dragon bone beams in the Hall of War banners. A dead bell was safest when everyone forgot who had gagged it, and a gagged war relic could keep a kingdom obedient longer than a living one. Every banner in the hall had once followed Dragon King Eryndor Valcyr into battle. Red banners for conquest, silver banners for surrendered houses, black banners for enemies who had not survived long enough to sign peace. Tonight, all of them waited over Ivara's head. Her wrists were bound to the bell chain with storm iron cuffs. Rainwater dripped from her sleeves onto the stone floor. Her gray servant dress clung to her shoulders, modest, soaked, and torn where the guards had dragged her from the lower relic room. A bruise darkened one cheek, but she kept her chin lifted because the court had already taken her safety, and she would not hand them her posture too. High Storm Warden Althara Grieve stood before her in a robe of dark blue silk stitched with silver lightning. Her hair was pale, her mouth calm, and her right hand rested over the thunder key at her waist, as if it were a holy organ. Ivara Cale Althara announced, oath-bound servant of the storm relics, you are charged with calling forbidden thunder into the citadel. Ivara looked past her to the broken window above the hall. Rain slashed through the dark. Thunder comes before permission, she said. Even here. A few nobles shifted as if logic from a servant were dirt tracked onto polished stone. Althara's eyes narrowed. The lower storm vault was sealed, yet blue lightning entered it while you were alone. I was cleaning the bell chain. Without command. With the order tablet you sent. An order could vanish. A key left weather behind. Ivara had seen rain cling to guilty metal before. Althara did not look down. That was the first answer. The tablet had vanished. So had the young warden who had delivered it. Ivara had learned years ago that orders given to servants could disappear the moment obedience became inconvenient. Althara turned toward the court. She admits touching the chain. I admit cleaning what I was ordered to clean. In storm law, Althara said unlawful touch is unlawful command. That was how keywork became hand guilt. Ivara almost laughed. Almost. In the Crown of Ash, nobles could call lightning through war horns, priests could bind thunder into bells, and dragon kings could make armies kneel with a single roar. But a servant's hand on a chain was easier to punish than a noble's key in a lock. The storm bell remained silent above her. It had been silent for 14 years. The court said that silence began after the border massacre, when King Eryndor returned from the western Ashlands without his royal roar. Since then, he had ruled with sword decree and stare, but never with the ancient command that belonged to dragon kings. The council called his silence restraint. The soldiers called it grief. The border widows called it guilt. When no guards stood close enough to hear. Ivara had cleaned the bell since her first year in lower relic service. She knew silence had weight. This silence did not feel empty. It felt gagged. And gagged things did not stay silent because they were dead. They stayed silent because someone kept holding the knot. Tonight, the knot smelled like storm metal in Althara's hand. The hall doors opened. Every banner stirred before the wind entered. Dragon King Eryndor Valcyr stepped into the Hall of War banners in black scale armor, rain shining on his shoulders like broken glass. He was tall, severe, and young in the wrong places, as if his face had been forced to grow around things no one allowed him to name. His dark hair was bound at the nape. His eyes burned a muted gold, not bright enough for fury, not cold enough for peace. The court bowed. Ivara did not. The chains did not allow it. Eryndor's gaze moved from the storm bell to the cuffs on her wrists. Then to Althara. Why is a palace servant chained to a war relic? Althara bowed with perfect measure. Because forbidden thunder answered her touch, Majesty. Eryndor looked at Ivara. Did it? His voice was low. It did not need volume to command the hall. Ivara felt the danger of answering him truthfully. A king could hear honesty as insult when everyone around him had spent years polishing lies into loyalty. The thunder did not answer me, she said. It came through the chain after the vault key turned. Althara's hand moved slightly over her thunder key. Eryndor saw it. So did Ivara. Hope pricked through her fear, sharp and foolish. Then the storm bell gave a sound. Not a ring. A breath against iron. The hall froze. Eryndor's face changed before he could hide it. Not much. Only around the mouth where a buried thing recognized its own grave. Althara moved first. Majesty, the relic is reacting to contamination. Ivara lifted her head toward the black bell. A silent bell should not breathe. Unless the breath had been trapped inside it before the servant ever touched the chain. Several nobles recoiled. Eryndor did not move. His eyes stayed on the bell, then on Ivara's chained wrists, then on the war banners surrounding them. Begin the judgment, Althara said quickly. If she called unlawful thunder, the bell will take her voice before dawn. Ivara's stomach turned cold. The storm bell did not take voices gently. The old servant said its first judgment pulled sound from the lungs, its second from memory, and its third from the name. No servant had survived a third ring. Eryndor's jaw tightened. Unchain her from the bell. For one breath, the hall obeyed silence. Then Althara said, Majesty, if she is removed before judgment, the forbidden thunder remains uncontained. The counselors behind her murmured agreement. Eryndor looked at them, and the old fear of his missing roar moved through the room. A king without his dragon command could be pressured by people brave enough to speak in groups. He knew it. Ivara saw him know it. His gaze returned to her. Something almost like apology crossed his face, but almost did not loosen iron. Proceed, he said. He had heard the bell breathe and still let judgment use her throat. His doubt had arrived before his mercy, and mercy had lost. The word landed harder than the chains. Althara lifted the thunder key. Lightning struck the citadel roof. The storm bell rang once. The sound did not take Ivara's voice. It gave back his. Royal roar retained. Servant throat selected. Thunder record opened. The bell had named why it answered. It had not yet named who tied the gag. A buried dragon roar tore through the hall deep and blue with lightning, and every war banner above them cracked from pole to hem. The storm bell had returned Eryndor's roar as record, not power. A record could accuse. Power could command. The bell had chosen accusation first. That difference kept the hall alive. If the roar had returned as command, every knee in the Hall of War Banners would have struck stone. Every soldier would have known where to place his blade. Every counselor would have learned whether Dragon King Eryndor Valcyr still carried the ancient force that made armies obey before thought could become treason. But the roar did not enter him cleanly. It tore through the bell, crossed the chain, passed above Ivara's bound wrists, and spread through the cracked banners like thunder trapped inside cloth. Eryndor's hand went to his throat. His fingers touched the place where a sound had once lived, and found only the ache of its outline. He had felt it. Ivara saw that much. The roar had brushed him like a lost blade returned to its sheath, and pulled away before he could close his hand around it. Althara Grieve saw it too. Her face did not break. That was worse. A broken face might have meant surprise. Her calm meant calculation had already begun. The judgment is contaminated, she said. The storm iron cuffs tightened around Ivara's wrists. Pain bit deep enough to steal her breath, but not her voice. That frightened the court more than her cry would have. The old servant's warnings said the storm bell took voices from the guilty. Yet Ivara's throat remained open, raw, alive. She swallowed and tasted lightning. Above her, the cracked banners did not fall. They listened. Warcloth remembered what court mouths survived by forgetting. Blue lines split through their embroidered dragons, following old battle seams and sealed command marks. The black banner of the western ashlands had cracked widest, its pole shivering, though no wind touched it. Eryndor looked at that banner. So did Althara. Ivara understood then that the bell had not rung randomly. It had struck the place everyone avoided, naming the border massacre the year the king returned without his roar, and the court returned with silence polished into law. Althara lifted one hand. No one is to approach the chain. Eryndor turned toward her. Why? Because a returned roar through a servant chain is contamination, not testimony. The words landed exactly where she intended on Ivara's body. A servant chain, not a royal relic. Not a war command line. Not evidence. Ivara forced herself upright as far as the cuffs allowed. The bell chain trembled against her back, cold and wet with stormlight. Read what passed through the chain. Althara's eyes cut to her. You do not command the storm bell. No, Ivara said. but your key already did. The storm bell answered with a low vibration that traveled down the chain and into Ivara's cuffs. It did not feel like blessing. It felt like a record using the only throat the law had made available. Blue lightning crawled from the bell's rim to the chain links, then down toward her bound wrists. The current stopped above her skin, hovering like a question. The bell read. Thunder key entered. Royal roar gagged. War command retained. Servant throat blamed. The bell had named the gag. It had not yet named the command trapped behind it. The hall froze around the words. Eryndor's face changed. This time he did not hide it. Royal roar gagged. Not lost. Not broken. Not abandoned by blood. Gagged. The word moved through him harder than the sound had. Ivara saw his throat work once, as if the buried roar had pressed from inside, and found the same old knot still waiting. Althara moved quickly. Majesty, this is precisely why the record cannot stand. The bell is forming language around her accusation. Ivara turned her head as much as the chain allowed. The thunder did not use my throat. Your law did, and law once named tightened harder than iron. The cuffs tightened again. She gasped but stayed standing. The bell vibrated harder. Law used throat entered. Servant voice intact. Judgment failure noted. Several counselors stepped back from the storm warden. Not far. Only enough to prove their courage had limits, and their loyalty had exits. Eryndor stared at the glowing words beneath the bell. Then very quietly he said, I ordered judgment after I heard the bell breathe. His admission did not lift the chain. It only gave the bell another royal sound to keep. The hall lost its breath. Ivara closed her eyes for one beat. There it was. Not absolution. A truth with blood on both sides. He had heard the bell breathe. He had seen Althara's hand move over the thunder key. He had watched Ivara chained beneath a war relic that should not have needed her throat. And still, he had said proceed. The storm bell accepted the admission before the court could soften it. Royal doubt entered. Judgment ordered. Servant throat exposed. King command implicated. Eryndor did not look away from the words. Good, Ivara thought, though pain made the thought brittle. Let the bell hold him too. Althara stepped toward the chain. This ends now. Her thunder key flashed blue-white. The chain jerked upward, dragging Ivara onto her toes. The first ring had not taken her voice, but the chain meant to take her balance. Her shoulder burned. Her wrist screamed against the cuffs. Eryndor moved. The bell answered before he touched the chain. Forced break collapses, thunder record. War command proof lost. Servant blame restored. That was Althara's trap. Any mercy strong enough to save Ivara would be violent enough to erase her. He stopped with his hand inches from the storm iron. Ivara saw the violence it cost him not to tear it apart. Althara saw it too. Majesty, she said softly. If you cannot free her without destroying the testimony, then perhaps the testimony is not lawful. Ivara breathed through the pain and looked up at the black bell. Read before she silences it. The storm bell rang without sound. Blue lightning spread through the cracked western banner, but only one line burned clear. The storm bell had not called thunder through Ivara. It had opened the record of the royal roar gagged inside it since the border massacre, and Althara's thunder key had touched the chain before Ivara's hand ever did. But the border massacre had not begun with silence. It had begun with a command. The Western Ashlands banner kept cracking after the bell named Althara's key. A key had been named. The hand behind the command had not. It did not fall. It split slowly, thread by thread, as if the cloth had been holding its breath for 14 years, and could no longer keep the old command stitched inside it. Warcloth did not tear from age. It tore where truth pushed hardest. Blue lightning ran along the black fabric, tracing a dragon sigil half-burned by battlefield smoke, then stopped at a tier near the center where someone had once cut away a mark before the banner returned to the citadel. Ivara remained beneath the storm bell with her wrists chained high and her throat still open. That was the part Althara hated most. The bell had rung. Judgment had begun. Yet Ivara could still breathe, still speak, still look at the court with rain on her face and pain in her shoulders. The storm iron cuffs had not taken her voice. They had tightened instead, as if the law itself wanted to finish what the relic had refused. Eryndor stood only a few steps away from the chain, close enough that Ivara could see the pulse moving in his throat. The roar had touched him. Not returned. Not restored. Touched. A touched roar could wound him. It could not yet free her. It left behind an outline, a pressure behind his teeth, a shape of command his body remembered, but could not yet use. His fingers curled once at his side, then opened. He did not reach for the chain again. Good, Ivara thought through the pain. If he tore it open, Althara would make mercy look like destruction. The western banner cracked wider. A sound came from inside the cloth. Not a voice. A command trying to become one. Althara lifted her thunder key. Majesty, this is battlefield contamination. War banners collect fear, blood, and dying cries. They cannot be treated as lawful testimony through a servant's throat. The phrase moved through the hall the way her doctrines always did, clean, sharp, ready to give cowards something polished to repeat. Ivara tightened her fingers around the chain as much as the cuffs allowed. Read the war command. Althara turned on her. Battle commands cannot be judged through a servant throat. The storm bell answered before Ivara could. The black iron rim shuddered. Blue lightning poured downward, but it did not enter Ivara's mouth. It crawled along the chain, touched the cuffs, and crossed the cracked western ashlands banner like a needle sowing fire through old cloth. The bell read. Border command entered. Royal roar intercepted. Massacre order retained. Storm warden seal applied. The bell had named the command. It had not yet named the mouth that gave it. The hall stopped moving. Not because the court understood, because it almost did. Massacre order retained. The words burned across the western banner in blue lightning, and every soldier in the hall saw them. Some had been boys when the border burned. Some had fathers buried beneath ashland stones. Some had worn medals from the campaign without asking why the king returned voiceless, and the council returned whole. Eryndor's face emptied in a way that was not cold. It was recognition without shelter. My roar, he said. It was there. The bell vibrated once. Royal roar intercepted. Althara moved quickly. Your Majesty's roar was unstable in the field. The Storm Warden office contained it to prevent command fracture. Ivara looked at the western banner. The cloth was still cracking around the line. Massacre order retained. You contain the roar, she said, but kept the order. And keeping a command was not containment. It was obedience to the wrong voice. Althara's eyes cut to her. A servant cannot interpret battlefield necessity. Ivara's throat burned, but her voice held. You blamed thunder because the command was louder. The storm bell pulsed. Command louder entered. Althara's hand tightened around the key. The chain jerked again. Ivara's body lifted onto her toes, pain flashing down her arms. The cuffs bit so sharply she nearly lost speech after all. Not to the bell. To the chain. To the law. To the key Althara kept pretending was only custody. Eryndor stepped forward. The bell's warning struck the floor in blue fire. Forced break collapses, thunder record. War command proof lost. Servant blame restored. He stopped. His restraint looked like violence turned inward. Ivara hated how much she needed it. Althara saw the pause and used it. Majesty, if you leave her chained, she suffers. If you break the chain, the record fails. That is not testimony. That is coercion wearing a storm's face. Eryndor did not look at her. He looked at Ivara. I ordered judgment after I heard the bell breathe, he said again, softer now, as if the words had become heavier after the banner read the command. And if my roar was gagged after the massacre, then my silence has been serving whoever kept the command buried. The storm bell held the sentence. Royal silence serving buried command. King command implicated. Storm Warden seal active. His silence had been used. His command today had used her. The western banner split another inch. Behind the blue fire, an image formed in the cloth, a field of ash lines of soldiers, waiting civilians trapped beyond a broken wall, and a command traveling down the ranks like a black storm. Complete the sweep. The words had no ink, but they carried authority. No written hand appeared. Not yet. Only the command. Then another sound struck the record. A roar. Deep blue. Impossible. Stop. The word tore through the banner and broke against a seal shaped like Althara's thunder key. Ivara's breath caught. The bell rang once without sound. Althara raised the key higher and the banner's image bent, trying to fold back into smoke. Ivara shoved her chained wrists forward until iron cut skin. Hold it. The chain burned blue. The storm bell answered her contact, not as choice but as witness. Chain witness maintained. Servant throat intact. Western banner record open. Althara's face hardened. Enough. Eryndor's voice cut through hers. No. Let it finish. The Western Ashlands banner cracked from pole to hem but still did not fall. The final line burned across it in blue lightning. The border massacre had not been born from Eryndor's roar. His roar had tried to stop the command, and Althara's seal had gagged it inside the storm bell before the army could hear him. But a command that survived a king's roar had been protected by more than one seal. The Western banner had shown the command, but not the commander. Complete the sweep still burned through the torn black cloth, blue lightning threaded through every letter, as if the order had been stitched there by a hand that expected history to rot before anyone looked closely. The banner did not fall. It hung above Ivara like a wound held open by stormlight. Her wrists remained chained to the bell chain. Her throat remained intact. That was the only reason the record could continue. And the worst reason for her pain to matter. The cuffs had cut deeper after the last ring. Warm blood slid beneath the storm iron and mixed with rainwater on her sleeves. Blue current hovered over her skin, without entering her, as if the storm bell understood one law the court refused: she was not the thunder's vessel. She was the point where the chain had been made to carry blame. Eryndor stood beneath the cracked banner, his face turned toward the words the army had once obeyed. The outline of his roar still moved in his throat, visible only in the way his jaw tightened and released like a command pressing against a sealed door. Not returned. Not usable. Only close enough to hurt. Althara Grieve stepped between him and the banner's light. Majesty command origin traces from a battlefield relic are notoriously unstable. Fear, blood, and ash distort authority. Ivara's fingers clenched around the chain. Read who gave the order. Althara turned her head slowly. Battlefield command origin cannot be tried through servant contact. The storm bell answered with a deep pulse that shook dust from the rafters. Servant contact. Battlefield command. Origin denied. The Western banner cracked wider. A thin line of blue lightning moved from the words "complete the sweep" to the broken place where the old command mark had been cut away. The missing cloth began to glow as if absence itself had edges. Ivara felt the chain pull upward. Althara's thunder key was working again. Not openly enough for accusation. Enough to make her arms tremble. The bell read. Council command entered. Storm warden seal. Carried. Royal counter-roar gagged. Army order completed. For one breath, the Hall of War banners became colder than the rain outside. Council command. Not royal command. Not dragon roar. Council. Eryndor looked at the line as if it had struck him through the mouth. If my roar tried to stop it, he said. Then someone used my silence to finish it. The storm bell kept the words. Royal silence used. Massacre completed. Current judgment. Implicated. Ivara heard that last line before the court knew how to respond. Current judgment implicated. Good. The bell had not let him stand clean beside the old wound. The massacre had used his silence, but tonight his command had used her throat. He had been made a weapon once. He had made her one now, even if someone else loaded the law. Eryndor's eyes shifted to her cuffs. Ivara saw the movement and braced herself. Do not, she said. He stopped. Althara's voice softened with dangerous precision. She forbids rescue now. Does that sound like testimony, Majesty, or manipulation? Ivara looked at the storm warden. You blamed thunder because the command was louder. The bell pulsed. Command louder entered. Storm warden seal active. Althara's mouth tightened. Then she lifted the thunder key high enough for everyone to see. The Western banner is unstable. I am sealing battlefield residue before it corrupts the royal hall. The key flashed. The banner began folding inward. The blue words bent. Complete the sweep tried to shrink back into cloth. The council line dimmed first, as if the command origin knew exactly where to hide. Ivara shoved her chained wrists forward. Pain burned white. The chain answered her movement, not as devotion, not as choice, but as witness. Blue lightning wrapped around the cuffs and ran up into the bell. Chain witness maintained. Physical strain increasing. Command origin not complete. Eryndor's hand rose. The storm bell struck the floor with warning light before he touched the chain. Forced break collapses, thunder record. Command origin lost. Servant blame restored. He lowered his hand slowly. Althara watched him do it. A king who cannot cut one servant loose should not presume to judge battlefield command. Eryndor did not look away from Ivara. A king who cuts her loose the wrong way gives you back the lie. The bell held that too. Wrong mercy entered. Lie restoration risk retained. Ivara's breath came ragged, but she did not let her knees bend. If she fell, Althara would call it storm sickness. If she screamed, Althara would call it contamination. If she stayed silent, the court would call silence proof. So she spoke. Read the seal that carried it. The western banner tore another inch. Behind the blue command, an image formed, not the battlefield now, but the war dais inside the citadel 14 years earlier. Counselors in storm-dark robes stood around a map of the western ashlands. A seal was pressed into wax. Althara's thunder key touched it, carrying the command into the bell's war channel. Then the image blurred as Eryndor's blue roar struck it. Stop! The roar did not command the army. It never reached them. It was caught in the storm bell, gagged against black iron, while the council command traveled forward wearing royal thunder. The bell read one final line across the western banner. The order to complete the sweep had not come from Eryndor's throat. It had passed through the council seal Ivara carried. Then used the gagged storm bell to make the army believe the king had roared it. The counselors did not deny the image on the western banner. They stepped away from it. That was how powerful men confessed when language would cost them too much. Not with words. With distance. The war dais burned in blue lightning above their heads, showing the old council seal, the stormwarden key, the intercepted roar, and the order that had gone forward wearing royal thunder. Complete the sweep. Ivara remained beneath the storm bell while the hall reorganized itself around fear. Her arms shook from the height of the chain. Blood had begun to darken the cuffs where storm iron met skin. Her throat still worked, but every breath scraped. The bell had not taken her voice. The law was trying to spend her body instead. Eryndor stood near enough to see the blood. He did not move toward her. He had learned the shape of the trap, and learning did not make it gentle. If he broke the chain by force, the command origin proof would collapse, and Althara would rebuild Ivara into the Thundercaller before the next ring faded. His restraint did not comfort her. It only proved the truth still needed her pain. Althara lowered the thunder key, but not far. The banner shows a wartime relay, Majesty. Council seals carry battlefield commands when weather distance or command fracture threatens the army. Eryndor turned his head slightly. Command fracture. The king's roar had become unstable. My roar said stop. The battlefield required completion. The storm bell pulsed. Completion entered. Ivara looked up at the western banner. The cloth still held the blue image of soldiers moving toward a broken wall. Beyond the wall, figures waited in ash and rain, not soldiers, not enough armor, not enough blades. Families. The image flickered before it could sharpen. Althara's key glowed. Ivara understood. The next thing hidden inside the banner was not who gave the order. It was what the order had finished. She tightened her fingers around the chain. Read what the sweep completed. Althara's eyes flashed. Civilian loss cannot be weighed through a palace servant's throat. The storm bell answered before the court could decide whether to be shocked. Civilian loss, palace servant, throat. The words vibrated down the chain. Ivara's cuffs tightened again, and she bit the inside of her cheek to keep from crying out. Pain was a language the court loved to translate against the poor. Blue lightning crawled from the bell to the western banner. The banner resisted. Not the cloth. The seal inside it. A dark blue mark spread over the image, trying to cover the figures beyond the wall. Althara's hand clenched around the thunder key, and the mark thickened. Eryndor saw it. Stop sealing the banner. Althara replied, I am preserving battlefield dignity. No, Ivara said, voice rough. You are preserving the part where victims become fog. The bell rang once without sound. Victims entered. Fog correction entered. The dark seal cracked. The western banner opened another layer. A white surrender cord appeared across the broken wall. Eryndor went very still. The cord was old battlefield law. Even servants knew it. A white surrender cord meant the opposing side had ceased arms and placed itself under royal judgment. Once tied across a gate, no army could lawfully complete a sweep without direct royal command. The banner read, "Surrender cord raised." Royal counter-roar issued. Council completion order carried. Civilian witness removed. The words struck the hall harder than thunder. Civilian witness removed. Ivara stared at the line until the pain in her wrists became distant. They had surrendered, she said. No one answered. The silence did. Eryndor's voice came low. I roared stop because the cord was raised. The storm bell pulsed. Royal counter-roar confirmed. Althara moved instantly. The cord may have been fraudulent, the banner answered. Fraud claim unsupported. The first true crack ran through Althara's calm. Not wide. Enough. Ivara saw it and held on. Eryndor looked at the counselors. You completed a sweep after surrender. Lord Vaymar, one of the older war counselors, lifted his chin. The Western Ashlands had broken oath before. Mercy would have left rebellion breathing. The storm bell kept the sentence. Mercy contested. Rebellion breathing entered. Ivara tasted the shape of it. There it was, not accident. Not panic. A philosophy sharpened into massacre. You wanted no witnesses, she said. Althara's gaze cut to her. You presume above your station. My station is the chain you blamed, Ivara said. And the chain is reading. The bell vibrated. Chain reading entered. The western banner split wider, showing the civilians beyond the wall carrying small copper oath bowls. Not weapons. Oath bowls. They had come to submit names, debts, and hostages under royal law. Then the council command passed through the storm channel. Complete the sweep. And Eryndor's blue roar struck the bell from another direction. Stop. The roar hit Althara's seal. The seal swallowed it. The army heard only thunder. Eryndor closed his eyes. Not to hide. To stay standing. Ivara saw the grief cross his face before he could make it king-shaped again. But grief did not clean his command tonight. He had still said, proceed. He had still let the bell use her throat after hearing it breathe. The storm bell agreed. Past roar misused. Current judgment implicated. Servant pain continuing. Eryndor opened his eyes. Ivara, he said. And her name sounded less like command now. Can the banner read without the chain? Althara's lips parted. The bell answered in blue fire. Chain witness required until war command sequence completes. Forced release collapses civilian witness record. Ivara almost laughed. Of course. Even truth had found a way to need a servant held in place. She looked at Eryndor. Then make them watch what your mercy failed to reach. The hall changed again. This time not temperature. Weight. Eryndor turned to the court rainwater still glistening on his armor. No one lowers their eyes. The western banner opened its final image for this layer. The surrender cord burning not by enemy hands but by blue-black thunder from the council relay. The storm bell read across the cracked cloth. The border sweep was completed after surrender was raised because the council wanted the witnesses removed before Eryndor's counter-roar could become law. No one lowered their eyes, but several nobles forgot how to stand like innocent men. The western Ashlands banner hung open above them, cracked from pole to hem blue lightning, showing the surrender cord, the council relay, and the sweep that moved forward before mercy could become command. The Hall of War banners did not shout. It listened with the frightened discipline of a court that had practiced obedience longer than truth. Beneath the storm bell, Ivara's arms had gone numb from wrist to shoulder. That frightened her more than pain. Pain meant her body still argued with the chain. Numbness meant the storm iron was beginning to win. The cuffs had cut deep enough that blood slid into the grooves where old command marks were carved. Blue current hovered above the wounds, never entering, never healing, only using the place where law had trapped her. Eryndor saw her hands. So did Althara. The storm warden moved first. Majesty, this must end before the servant suffers permanent damage. Ivara almost smiled. Almost. Althara had discovered mercy only when mercy could close the record. Eryndor's jaw tightened. You chained her there. Under judgment law. Under your key. The storm bell pulsed. Key entered. Judgment law entered. Servant damage increasing. The last line burned faintly across the floor, and the court stared at it as if pain became indecent only after a relic wrote it down. Ivara forced air through her throat. Read why the chain needs me. Althara turned sharply. No. That word gave the hall more proof than any confession would have. Eryndor looked at her. Why? Because the chain is responding to distress, not authority. Ivara lifted her head as far as the cuffs allowed. Then let it say distress. The storm bell trembled. Blue lightning moved down from the bell rim into the chain, then into the blood-wet grooves at Ivara's cuffs. It did not enter her throat. It moved around it through the metal, through the place where command had been forced to pretend it was guilt. The bell read. Storm linen service entered. Bell chain contact retained. After command heard. Witness standing denied. Ivara stared at the words. After command. She knew that phrase. Lower relic servants used it in whispers for the sounds that remained after the war relics were polished. Not echoes. Not memory exactly. More like orders that had failed to die. Ivara had heard them since her first year in lower relic service stop, hold, retreat, silence names breaking inside thunder. She had thought all storm relic servants heard them and simply learned not to speak. Althara's face told her otherwise. Eryndor's voice came through the blue light. After command heard. Althara answered too quickly. A servant superstition. Lower halls breed noise into fear. The bell struck the floor with a thin ring. Denial entered. Ivara closed her eyes once. Her mother had worked storm linen before her. She had mended banners after border campaigns and come home with shaking hands, refusing to sleep near bells. When Ivara was small, she had asked why her mother wrapped her ears during thunderstorms. So you do not answer what was never meant to reach you, her mother had said. Ivara had thought it meant thunder. Now the chain under her wrists hummed with 14 years of buried command. She opened her eyes. Read what after command was kept from. Althara's thunder key flashed. A palace servant cannot compel military record beyond assigned contact. The bell kept the words. Assigned contact. Military record. Compel. Then the western banner glowed again, but this time the lightning did not show the battlefield. It showed the lower relic room after the massacre. Wet banners spread across stone-black ash. Washed from silver thread, servants bent over warcloth, while wardens stood with keys at their belts. A woman with dark hair tied in a plain knot paused over the western banner. Ivara stopped breathing. Her mother. Not as a ghost. Not alive. A record of labor kept in stormcloth. The bell read. Ivara Cale heard counter-roar residue. Service silence ordered. Storm linen line retained. Witness function concealed. Ivara's knees weakened. The chain held her upright. Eryndor looked from the banner to Ivara. Your mother Ivara did not answer at first. If she spoke too soon, grief might take the line from her mouth, and Althara would call it contamination. So she let the bell answer. Ivara Cale. Storm linen servant. After command witness. Voice standing denied. Althara said many servants handled relic cloth after campaigns. That does not make their frightened impressions law. Ivara's voice came low. No. But it made them useful. The storm bell pulsed. Useful entered. Eryndor stepped closer to the chain and stopped before the warning could flash again. He was learning the boundary now. He hated it. That hatred sat in the room like unsheathed steel. What is she? He asked. Althara said. An accused thundercaller. The bell answered over her. Storm bell witness located. Royal blood absent. Command possession absent. Chain testimony active. Ivara felt the words pass through the hall. Royal blood absent. Command possession absent. Not queen. Not chosen. Not holding his roar. A witness. Only a witness. And somehow that frightened the court more. Althara's expression hardened. Witnesses require standing. She has none. Eryndor's eyes did not leave Ivara. Then I grant it. The hall recoiled. Althara moved at once. A king cannot grant war standing to a servant under storm judgment, while the record depends on her contact. Eryndor answered. My court granted her blame under the same contact. The storm bell rang once low and blue. Blame granted. Standing challenged. Royal recognition entered. Ivara's cuffs loosened by the width of a breath. Not enough to free her. Enough to prove the chain had heard. Althara saw it and drove her thunder key into the air as if turning a lock only she could see. The western banner folded inward. Ivara Cale's name flickered. Ivara cried out and shoved her wrists forward until blood ran hot beneath the iron. No. Read what happened to her voice. The bell read before Althara could seal it. Ivara Cale heard the king's counter-roar after the massacre. Her voice was bound into the storm bell so the stopped command would never reach court record. The blue lightning snapped upward. The bell swallowed the last word, then opened one more line above Ivara's head. The storm bell had not needed Ivara, because she carried forbidden thunder. It needed her because her mother's silenced voice was still knotted inside the chain. Blue lightning tightened around the bell chain, and for the first time Ivara heard a woman breathe inside the iron. Not loudly. Not clearly. Only a thin sound beneath the storm caught between links. As if someone had been trying for 14 years to speak through metal and had learned to survive on almost no air. Ivara's hands went cold despite the blood under the cuffs. Her mother had not died silent because grief had eaten her voice, as the lower servants used to say. Ivara Cale's voice had been put somewhere. Kept somewhere. Knotted into the very chain Ivara had been ordered to clean. Then blamed for touching. Above her the storm bell trembled without ringing. The war banners held still. The court did not. Nobles turned their faces from the chain as if a servant woman's mother could become contagious once named. Dragon knights shifted their weight. A few lower wardens looked at Althara and then quickly away. Eryndor did not look away. That was something. It was not freedom. It was not enough. But he looked at the chain as if he finally understood that relics did not become holy by age. Sometimes they became holy because everyone agreed not to hear what was trapped inside them. Althara lifted her thunder key. Voice residue from storm linen servants is common after battle relic work. It is not legal testimony. Ivara's throat ached with the shape of her mother's name. Ivara Cale was not residue. The storm bell pulsed. Name retained. Althara's mouth tightened. She was a servant who spent too long near unstable thundercloth. Ivara looked up at the black iron bell. Read what she heard. The thunder key flashed before the bell could answer. The chain snapped upward. Pain burst through Ivara's shoulders. Her feet left the floor for half a breath before the chain lowered enough for her toes to touch stone again. A strangled sound tore from her, but her voice remained hers. Eryndor moved. The bell's warning flared blue across the floor. Forced release collapses, chain voice record. Ivara Cale testimony lost. Servant blame restored. He stopped so abruptly his armor scraped. Althara's gaze sharpened. You see, Majesty. Every layer of this so-called testimony depends on making her suffer. Ivara forced air into her lungs. No. Every layer of your law does. The storm bell answered. Law pain entered. Eryndor's eyes lifted to Althara. Lower the key. The record is unstable. Lower it. Althara did not obey. That disobedience moved through the hall like a blade leaving its sheath. Not open rebellion. Worse. Practice. Ivara saw then that Althara had been refusing kings for years, only politely enough that the refusal looked like protection. The chain hummed beneath Ivara's palms. A woman's breath flickered again. Ivara closed her bleeding fingers around the storm iron and whispered, Mother, if the bell kept you, let it read you. The storm bell did not choose her. It used the contact she refused to release. Blue lightning moved from Ivara's blood to the chain, then upward toward the bell's rim. A faint image opened in the iron Ivara Cale in the lower relic room, younger than Ivara. Remembered her with ash on her cheek and both hands pressed against the western banner after the massacre. Her mouth opened around one word. Stop. Not her word. The king's counter-roar. She had heard it after the army did not. The bell read. Counter-roar residue heard. Storm linen witness identified. Voice standing denied. Witness voice bound. Ivara's breath broke. Eryndor's face had gone still. The line did not clear him. It wounded him. His counter-roar had existed. It had failed to reach the army. Then it had reached a servant woman afterward, too late to save the dead and too dangerous to leave loose. Althara spoke quickly. A servant repeating royal sound without authorization is a threat to command purity. Command purity, Eryndor said. His voice was soft enough to frighten the hall. The bell pulsed. Command purity entered. Ivara tasted blood where she had bitten her tongue. You bound her voice because she heard you bury his. Althara's eyes flashed. I preserved a realm from a false mercy record that would have shattered military trust. The storm bell kept the answer. False mercy record entered. Military trust preserved. Eryndor stepped closer to the chain, stopping just before the warning line. My order to stop was mercy, Althara answered. In war, mercy can be treason wearing a kinder face. Ivara looked at him then. Not with pity. With accusation. Your court taught her that, she said. And tonight you let the same court use me. The words struck him harder than Althara's doctrine. Good. If truth was going to hurt her body, it could hurt his pride too. The storm bell vibrated. Current judgment linked. Past silencing echoed. Althara drove the thunder key downward. The chain darkened. Marin's image began to fold into static. Her mouth blurred. The word stop dissolved into a storm crackle. Ivara screamed. Hold the voice. The bell read through her pain. Chain witness strain critical. Voice not exposed. Removal requires lawful refusal of silence order. Eryndor's head lifted. Whose silence order? The blue fire gathered in the bell's hollow throat. Althara's key trembled for the first time. Ivara held the chain with both hands, blood slick beneath her fingers. Read it. The storm bell rang once low and broken. Ivara Cale's voice had not been bound because she repeated forbidden thunder. It had been bound by Stormwarden order, so Eryndor's command to stop the massacre would remain trapped inside the bell and never become law. The bell did not let the silence order disappear after naming it. Blue lightning held the words above the hall long enough for every noble to understand the shape of the crime, even if they were not ready to speak its name. The Stormwarden order had not merely hidden a sound. It had prevented the Dragon King's mercy from becoming law. It had taken a command that could have stopped the Western slaughter and locked it inside a relic, then used a servant woman's voice as the knot. Ivara's hands slipped on the chain. Blood made the storm iron slick. Her throat was still open, but each breath scraped more sharply now, as if the bell had begun pulling the air around her voice thinner. She was not losing sound to guilt. She was losing strength to witness. Eryndor saw it. His face hardened in a way that no longer looked like the cruel king the court feared. It looked like a man realizing that restraint could also become violence when someone else paid the cost. Tell me how to remove the silence order, he said. Althara answered before the bell could. You do not remove it. Stormwarden silence orders are placed to protect the crown from battlefield instability. The crown, Eryndor said, or the council, the bell pulsed. Crown invoked. Council implied. Stormwarden order active. Ivara lifted her head. Read whose silence it protected. Althara's thunder key flashed. A bound servant cannot interrogate war law through her mother's residue. Ivara's lips parted around pain. Then why does war law keep answering? The chain burned blue. The storm bell read. Council assent entered. Stormwarden order applied. Royal counter-command withheld. Servant witness bound. Massacre legality preserved. The last line bent the hall out of shape. Massacre legality preserved. Not grief. Not confusion. Legality. The sweep had needed a clean record after the dead were already ash. If Eryndor's stop command had entered the war ledger, then every soldier who continued the sweep would have obeyed a false order. Every counselor who praised the victory would have praised treason. Every banner raised afterward would have carried murder under royal color. So they had made the massacre lawful by gagging the only command that could have stopped it. Eryndor's voice came low. You made my silence into permission. The bell answered. Royal silence converted. Permission record created. Ivara looked at him through the blue light. And tonight you made my chain into consent. The words struck too cleanly to miss. Eryndor did not defend himself. Good. Althera did. She was placed under judgment according to storm law. Ivara's shoulders shook. Storm law keeps needing someone lower to carry what higher hands did. The storm bell rang softly. Lower carrier entered. Althara's mouth tightened. This has become sedition. No, Eryndor said. It has become readable. He stepped closer to the chain, stopping at the boundary where blue warning light crossed the floor. He did not touch it. That restraint held now not because Althera had trapped him, but because he finally understood what the trap was made of. Ivara Cale, he said, and this time her name did not sound like pity. What does the bell require? She wanted to hate him for asking while her wrists bled. Part of her did, but the question mattered because it was a question. She looked up into the bell's black hollow. Read how the bound voice is released. The storm bell trembled. Marin's breath moved inside the chain, thin and shaking. The bell read. Release requires standing. Standing requires royal refusal of false consent. False consent tied to present judgment. Servant blame must be voided before chain opens. Ivara closed her eyes. Of course. The old crime and the present one were tied together. Her mother's voice had been bound so the king's stop command could not become law. Ivara's throat had been blamed, so the bell's record could be called contamination. If Eryndor freed her without voiding the charge, Althara could claim the record died with the accused. Eryndor understood at the same moment. I cannot free the chain first, he said. The bell pulsed. Correct. Althara seized the word. Then you admit the servant remains lawfully under judgment. Eryndor turned on her. No, I admit your law was built so freedom would destroy evidence. The hall held still. Ivara forced her fingers tighter around the chain. Then refuse it. Althera's eyes widened slightly. Not fear. Calculation interrupted. Eryndor faced the court. I refuse the judgment placed on Ivara Cale. The storm bell shook. Althara spoke over the vibration. A king cannot cancel storm judgment while the accused remains attached to the judging relic. Eryndor did not raise his voice. I can refuse to let my authority be used as its throat. The bell answered. Royal refusal entered. Present servant blame challenged. False consent weakening. The cuffs loosened again. Only slightly. Enough for air to touch the torn skin beneath the iron. Ivara almost collapsed from the small mercy of it. Almost. The chain held her upright. The western banner flared behind Althara, showing the old war dais again. Counselors pressing seals. The thunder key carrying the order. Marin Cale hearing the stop command too late. Then another image formed under it. Tonight. Ivara chained beneath the bell. Althara lifting the key. Eryndor saying proceed. The bell read both at once. Past silence order mirrored. Present judgment mirrored. Storm warden method retained. Ivara stared at the words. Althara had used the same shape twice. A royal command pressured through fear. A servant voice blamed. A relic gagged until the office could decide what became law. Eryndor's face went pale with fury. You repeated the method. Althara's voice stayed cold. I preserved command stability. Ivara looked at the bell chain where her mother's breath still trembled. No. You preserved the right to decide which royal words survive. The storm bell rang once deep and blue, and above them Marin Cale's bound voice finally spoke one word through the chain. Stop. Every war banner in the hall bent inward as if one dead servant woman's voice had struck them from behind the cloth. The sound did not echo like thunder. It settled. It moved through the cracked western banner, through the storm iron chain, through the old command marks carved into the floor. It touched every soldier who had ever marched beneath royal color and made their hands remember weight. Ivara felt it through her wrists. Not power. Witness. Marin Cale's bound voice had spoken only one word, and that word had done what 14 years of silence could not. It had made the hall understand that the massacre had not ended because no one had commanded mercy. Mercy had been commanded. Mercy had been trapped. Althera's face went still. Too still. Then she raised the thunder key again. Voice release from a bound servant line is unlawful, she said. The chain has become hostile to command stability. Ivara laughed once, breathless and broken. You call every honest sound hostile. The storm bell pulsed. Honest sound entered. Althera's key flashed. The bell chain tightened so suddenly Ivara's feet left the floor. Pain tore through her shoulders. Her throat opened around a cry, but the bell caught the sound before the court could turn it into weakness. Chain pressure increased. Voice theft attempted. Storm warden seal active. Eryndor moved to the edge of the warning light. He did not cross it. His hands were clenched so hard the knuckles shone pale beneath rain and ash. What breaks the seal? He asked. Althera answered. Nothing lawful. The bell answered differently. False judgment must be voided. Bound witness must be named. Royal countercommand must be entered as law. Ivara's vision blurred. Royal countercommand. The command the army had never heard. The word her mother had carried until Althara tied it into iron. Eryndor looked up at the storm bell, and for the first time the court saw fear on his face without being able to call it weakness. He had lived 14 years with a missing roar and a massacre wearing his silence. Now the bell was asking him to give the command again, not as battle fury, not as dragon power, but as law spoken before those who had profited from its absence. Althera saw the same thing. You cannot enter a past battlefield command into present law through a servant chain, she said. Ivara's voice shook. Because then the dead would have standing. The western banner flared. Dead standing requested. Council discomfort noted. A few nobles flinched at the last line. Eryndor's mouth tightened. Read who the order served. Althera snapped, Majesty. But the bell had already begun. Blue lightning moved across the western banner and opened a new image. Not the field, not the broken wall, but the council chamber after the sweep. A map of the western ashlands lay under dripping red wax. Trade routes were drawn over burned villages. Fortresses were circled. Border mines were marked in silver. The bell read. Massacre completed. Witnesses removed. Border claims secured. Council houses enriched. Victory banner sanctified. The room changed. Not loudly. Deeply. The massacre had not been only fear. Not only military necessity. Not only the old excuse of rebellion breathing too long. It had been profitable. Ivara looked at the nobles who now stared anywhere but the banner. That is why the command had to sound like his roar. The bell pulsed. Royal blame required. Council benefit concealed. Eryndor's eyes moved across the court. Men who had praised his silence now feared his sight. But the bell did not let him stand above the accusation. Tonight's image opened again beside the old one. Ivara chained beneath the storm bell Althara, lifting the thunder key Eryndor, saying proceed. The record read. Past command used king. Present judgment used servant. Royal hesitation entered. Servant harm continuing. Ivara swallowed hard. The hall blurred for a moment, not from tears but from strain. The chain had become a second spine made of iron and storm. She could feel Marin's voice inside it, faint, now as if that single word had cost the dead woman everything she had preserved. Eryndor saw her sag. No more, he said. Althera's eyes sharpened. Then end it, Majesty. Break the chain and accept that the record dies with the accused. The trap opened its mouth again. This time Eryndor did not look at the chain first. He looked at Ivara. What do you choose? The question struck her harder than the cuff. No one in that hall had asked her that. Not the guards, not the council, not the storm warden, not even the king before he said proceed. Choice felt dangerous in a body already being used. Ivara lifted her bleeding wrists as far as the chain allowed. I choose the command entered before the chain opens. The storm bell rang low. Witness consent entered. Althara's composure cracked. She cannot consent while under storm judgment. Eryndor turned toward the court. Then hear me void it. The thunder key flared. Althara shouted. Avoided judgment releases forbidden thunder. No, Ivara said, forcing each word past pain. It releases what you made forbidden. The bell trembled. Eryndor faced the western banner. His throat moved. The roar did not come, only its outline, only the wound where it had been. For one terrible heartbeat, the court saw him fail again. Then he spoke as a man, not a relic. By the authority my council buried and my command misused, I enter the order the army was denied. The storm bell opened above Ivara like a black sky. Marin's voice stirred in the chain. The western banner burned blue. Eryndor said, "Stop." This time the word did not enter the bell as a trapped sound. It entered the hall as law. The storm iron cuffs split halfway open but did not fall. The bell read one final demand across every crack in the western banner. For the storm bell to open without erasing Ivara the Dragon King must refuse not only the old massacre order but the council authority that made servant throats pay for royal silence. The council authority cracked before the chain did. It began as a thin blue line across the floor beneath the war dais, moving from the western Ashlands banner to the feet of every counselor who had signed old victory rolls with clean hands. The storm bell did not ring this time. It listened for what the court would try to save first. Not Ivara, not the dead, not the command that had been buried. Authority. Althara saw it and stepped backward, thunder key still raised. Majesty, be careful. If you refuse council war authority before the storm bell, you do not merely reopen one battlefield. You weaken every campaign order issued under Crown Seal. Eryndor looked at her. No, he said. I weaken every lie that needed my seal after my voice was gagged. The blue line brightened. Ivara hung beneath the bell with her cuffs half open and still cutting into her wrists. Blood ran down her hands. Her throat had survived the judgment, but her body trembled under the cost of being the place where truth passed because law had left no cleaner road. Ivara Cale's single word still lingered in the chain. Stop. Not thunder. Not rebellion. A command that should have become law 14 years ago. Althara lifted her key higher. The council acted to preserve the border. The storm bell pulsed. Preserve entered. The western banner answered with a flash of burned surrender cord. Ivara forced herself to speak. Preserve what? The bell read. Mines retained. Trade road. Secured. Witnesses removed. Victory narrative stabilized. The hall seemed to shrink around the words. Eryndor's eyes moved across the counselors one by one. You used my silence to finish a slaughter, then used my missing roar to make me rule under suspicion. No one answered. Althara did. We used what remained stable. Ivara laughed once, barely a sound. You mean what remained useful? The storm bell rang low. Useful entered. Council authority challenged. Althara's key flared black-blue and the half-open cuffs bit down again. Ivara cried out. The western banner blurred. The old and present records overlapped the surrendered border wall. Marin's bound voice. Ivara chained beneath the bell, Eryndor saying proceed. The bell read through the distortion. Present judgment still attached. Servant harm continuing. False authority resisting release. Eryndor stepped to the edge of the warning light. He did not break the chain. He did not seize the key. He did not become the roar they had trained the hall to fear. He spoke. I refuse the council authority that completed the western sweep after surrender was raised. The war banners shuddered. Althara's mouth opened, but Eryndor continued before doctrine could dress itself. I refuse the storm warden seal that gagged my counter-command. I refuse the judgment that placed Ivara Cale's throat beneath the same method used against her mother. I refuse any law that needs a servant body to hide a royal crime. The storm bell opened. Not upward, inward. The black iron hollow filled with blue lightning, and inside it a dragon roar formed above Ivara, not as a beast, not as a crown, not as power entering her blood. It formed as command finally released from burial. The bell read. Old massacre order refused. Council war authority broken. Storm warden silence order voided. Servant blame severed. The storm iron cuffs fell open. Ivara dropped. Eryndor crossed the distance then, but still stopped before touching her. His hands hovered uselessly for one breath. Powerful hands that finally understood they were not permission. Ivara, he said. May I? She should have hated how much the question steadied her. Maybe part of her did, but she nodded once. He caught her before her knees struck stone. The hall watched the Dragon King lower an oath-bound servant to the floor beneath the storm bell and kneel beside her instead of standing over her. He did not lift her like a rescued bride. He did not present her like a prize. He held her only long enough for her to find the ground. Then he let go. Ivara stayed sitting for one moment, breathing through pain. Her wrists were torn, her voice was raw, her gray dress was soaked with rain and blood, and no bell king or war banner made that beautiful. It was simply what the truth had cost. Althara moved for the key. Marin's voice struck the chain again. Stop. This time, the whole hall heard it. The thunder key cracked in Althara's hand. Blue lightning ran backward through her seal, up her arm and into the storm bell. It did not kill her. It did not give the court an easy spectacle. It wrote, Storm Warden order abused. Council seal carried unlawful command. Servant voices bound. Record witnessed. Dragon Knights seized Althara when the writing finished. She did not confess. She recited storm law until they took the key from her broken hand. Eryndor rose slowly and faced the court. The outline of his roar burned in his throat, but he did not use it to force their knees down. All war banners from the Western campaign will be reopened, he said. Every service death tied to storm relics will be read again. Ivara Cale's name will enter the royal record as witness, not residue. Ivara Cale's charge is void, a counselor whispered. And if the border houses hear this, Eryndor looked at the cracked Western banner. Then they will hear what my roar tried to say before you buried it. The storm bell rang once. Clear. No voice was taken. The Western banner split fully, and fell not as ruin but as release. Under it, a hidden strip of white cloth dropped to the floor, the surrender cord from the massacre field preserved inside the banner for 14 years. Ivara stood without Eryndor's hand. Only after she was steady did he offer it. She looked at him for a long moment. You used the law that chained me. Yes, he said. And you cannot make that vanish by refusing it well. No. His answer was quiet enough to be human. She placed her fingers in his hand not as surrender but because she chose to stand before the hall with the king, who had finally let truth cost him something. Above them, blue lightning softened around the storm bell until the dragon roar became rain-colored light. Ivara Cale's voice faded from the chain, no longer trapped, no longer useful, no longer denied. And in the Hall of War Banners, where servant throats had once paid for royal silence, the storm bell rang with Eryndor's buried roar at last, not to command a massacre but to end the lie that had survived it.